Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And today I'm here to talk to you about yet another installment of things they've been teaching you wrong about D&D on purpose. And you will note that in my backdrop today, I've got Lords of Olympus, a fantastic diceless RPG, and the game that inspired it, Amber. You can see it's a well-worn copy. This has been through a lot of stuff. It has been a game that I have used just a tremendous amount, and it's had the damage to show it. One of the greatest games of all time, and of course Lords of Olympus owes an enormous debt to it, but both of them are games where you play kind of immortals. In Lords of Olympus you play the children of the Greek gods, and they're great games. There goes my cat. They're great games because it's got no dice mechanics, no random mechanics at all. There's no special chips. You don't use cards. You don't use anything. It's based on a system of evaluations, of comparisons of ranks and things like that. And in effect, what it does is that your players are really, after the initial creation of the characters, it's all just about portraying the character. They don't really have to worry about the mechanics. The mechanics are something that the DM handles. And it means that people just break free of all the bonds of thinking about things in terms of their statistics or their character sheets. They just kind of know what their character's strengths and weaknesses are and role play it. But I put these up ironically because today I'm talking about dice rolls. And one thing I've heard increasingly as the ridiculous dramatism of professional D&D live streams on YouTube has come out is people advising DMs that they should fudge dice rolls for dramatic effect. That the idea is that you shouldn't let the roll of a die have a character, get themselves killed when they're not meant to be killed. Well, guess what? There is no meant to be, all right? An RPG is not a story. It's not a novel. It's not a TV show. An RPG is a simulation of a living world. The closest comparison is not to literature. It's not to a stage play or to drama. The closest comparison is to history. Now, history is full of people that got killed in really inconvenient moments, that screws up everything else. And then it creates this unpredictability that goes beyond the normal confines of drama. Drama in some ways becomes much less interesting than history because it's very rare that you will see someone doing literature or doing a film where somebody seemingly dies for no reason in the middle of something, or something happens in the middle of the story, as it were, with no particular logic to it, and then this changes everything. So this is something that creates a different kind of intensity and a different kind of situation. If you've been told that you need to fudge your dice rolls, either to be easier on the players, or because the players will be upset, they'll be triggered if their characters die, you've been given the wrong advice. And yes, there could be times when, due to a bad die roll, somebody's favorite character will drop dead and then they'll be upset about it. But this is part of the game. This is something that they signed up for. And you have to impose this understanding on the players. Now, am I saying that you should never, ever, ever, ever fudge a die roll? I'm not going to be that much of an absolutist. There might be moments where, for whatever reason, you as the DM feel it is necessary to fudge a die roll. But if you turn that into like an open permission slip, a blank check to do that as much as you like, you're going to end up with a game that is going to lose a sense, first of all, a sense of consistency for the characters, and second, for the players, right? A sense of immersion in the world, that the world is real and has real consequences. And secondly, it's going to remove a real sense of challenge for the players. If they know that you're going to pull their asses out of it, then this is going to make it less meaningful for them. I had a situation once where I had one player, it was a superhero campaign, that but it was not a superhero campaign like a typical one. It wasn't, following the standard superhero tropes. And this player assumed kind of that it was. And so when there was this huge mess up, this totalitarian government had basically taken over the earth, and people were escaping from this, and he decided that he was going to go back and fix everything by himself. And he got his ass kicked, right? He just got royally messed up. He didn't quite die, but he was essentially taken out of the game and had to go on with another character because of the consequences of what happened. And he was just stunned because he expected that what was going to happen is that he would go down there and, the dice be damned, the rules be damned, the sense of a living world be damned. He was just going to somehow manage to fix it all himself because he figured he's the hero of the story. Now, in an RPG, your characters are not the heroes of the story in the same sense that in a TV show they're the heroes of the story, right? If it's Superman in a movie and Superman loses his powers, he's going to get them back at the end somehow. And that might happen in an RPG version of an equivalent of Superman, but it might not. And it's not, if the players have that expectation that it will, then they're going to act very differently than if they have the expectation that it won't. Now, in some genres, you might want to have mechanics that can assist to create those kinds of moments of heroism. But in most games, what you really want is to create a living world that feels like a consistent world the way our world feels like a consistent world. And part of that consistency is chaos. It's the unexpected, and it's things not working out for you. And the challenge then becomes, the heroic challenge is to be able to move on from that either directly with the character if the character's still alive, or to move on from that in the sense of everybody else going on and then figuring out how to fix things or how to make things right. And even in games like Lords of Olympus and Amber, you have that same situation because the unexpected things come from the actions and choices that the players and that the NPCs take. And the rules, people think, sometimes I've heard people try to criticize Amber and by default Lords of Olympus by claiming that it's all just, whatever the DM wants happens. That's not right. There are very strict defined rules of how things are supposed to work out. And in fact, if there aren't dice, the DM has to be even more careful about following the rules. The dice are there to allow a level of leeway, you could say, in terms of what might happen. The DM doesn't have to decide for himself, and he doesn't have to follow a strict formula. He has to roll the dice, and then there's a range of possible things that can happen depending on how the dice roll goes. This is an essential part of the game actually working. Now, some of you might think, yeah, but my players will never go for this, but the reason for this is if your players, if they're new, because they don't know what the game is like yet, and if they've been around for a while and they have this kind of expectation, it's because they've been very badly served by the modern RPG hobby. They've gotten used to things being a certain way, or they've seen stuff on YouTube that makes them think that it should go a certain way, and that's not how it should go. And here's the kicker, that if you make this clear and then stick to your guns, there's going to come a time where most players, any player that isn't fundamentally spoiled, and that is most players are there because they want to really enjoy the game. And they're going to discover, maybe after a couple of times when they feel very disappointed, but then in the long term they're going to say, wow, okay, it matters way more now that I know that this is the case. If my character can die at any moment, then his being alive matters a lot more. And what he does matters a lot more. So this is what you want to do, because this is going to enrich your game. It's not going to impoverish it. Careful, cat. She's surprisingly unnimble there for a second. So your players, I've got some players that have now, at this point, I've got some players that have started on D&D 5th edition, and a few that started even with D&D 3rd edition. And so a lot of them are new to old school gaming. And then they play a game, they're used to a D&D game where either the DMing, the fudging of dice has set it up so that they feel like they're automatically supposed to win any challenge, win any dungeon, win any fight. Or even if that doesn't happen, that there's other things. They're going to be miraculously resurrected if they die or something like that. And of course, in the default D&D game, nowadays, Raise Dead has become so easy to manage that this is, to an extent, a problem, right? It makes it a lot less of a challenge. And then they start playing old school games like Lion and Dragon, or most other OSR games. There's quite a few OSR games, even the ones that have spells like Raise Dead, make them much harder to operate. There's something that you can get maybe at very high level, and Lion and Dragon has no Raise Dead. So they play this, and then they realize, okay, my guy is now 6th or 7th level, and in a lot of D&D games, that would make him effectively unkillable, right? He could be literally killed, but then he could come back through magic. And in Lion and Dragon, it's not that, and it's in fact your guy can be really, really powerful, because by the scale of that game, where the toughest people in the world might be level 15, a guy who's level 7 is really powerful. He's more powerful than 99% of people he's going to meet in the campaign world. Right? He's not more powerful than most monsters, maybe. Well, probably is more powerful than the majority of monsters. But he knows that an unlucky turn could still be the end of him. And what does this do? I'm going to point to you to one saga where this does happen, which is Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, and this is because George R.R. Martin was inspired by history. He was inspired by the War of the Roses, which is also the basis of my Dark Albion setting. And in history, this has happened all the time. We have these guys that are super protagonistic, and you think, okay, this guy's the hero, right? Whether it's, what's his name, Stark, the Stark patriarch, I forget his first name now, Ned Stark, or whether it's Richard of York, right? And you think, this is the guy that's going to set everything right, and he's going to have a whole bunch of difficulties and challenges, but he's going to overcome them somehow and have lucky turns and be saved at the last minute. And nope, he gets decapitated, right? Or Khal Drogo, the most badass barbarian guy. He dies from an infection, right? And you watch this, most of you watching this, probably like Game of Thrones. Odds are, there's probably some of you that don't. Maybe you don't for other reasons than that. But that aspect of it, that element where anybody can die, where your favorite characters can die, you think that's meant to be horrible in the game. But when you watch this show, you freaking love it, right? Because it creates this sense of tension, this sense of real importance to everything that happens, because you know that it could be very easy for any one of these characters to just, for George R. R. Martin to have a bad day at the office, and then suddenly he's killed off Tyrion Lannister, right? So it's the same thing with your games. Do this in your games, and your players might not like it for the first session or two, but then after a while they're going to start realizing that this is something that's good. I'm not saying go out and try to kill your characters. I'm just saying let the dice fall where they may. Do this, because you're going to see that it's going to change and improve your gaming experience. That's it for today. Please subscribe to the channel. Share this video anywhere you think it'll be watched, or where you think it might be needed, where people might need to hear this. And if you want to support me, then you can go to the Patreon Appropriate Characters and be a patron of that show. It's a great show with me and Grim Jim and Venture Satanis, and we talk about the problems in RPG culture or news in RPG culture or stuff like that. If you don't want to support them and you just want to support me, then click on my blog in the link description below. There's a PayPal button. But most of all, just share. I wanted to thank everybody who's followed me, because we're now well over 400 followers. I had seen last week, we're at 400 followers. I should thank everybody who's followed me. And I looked yesterday, and there was like 425, right? So things are moving on up. And I think that's a pretty good pace of growth. And I really, really do thank everybody who's been interested enough to subscribe. Ring that bell for notifications. I'm going to be doing more live streams, and I'm probably not going to be very good about scheduling them ahead of time, so it might come as a surprise. So you'll want the notifications if you want to get on the live stream and chat with me live as I film. And but just share with everybody. because that's one of the best ways you can help me out right now is to spread the word about this channel and to hear about these controversial things that must be said. Currently smoking Near Bent Billiard plus McCormick's Syrian Latakia.